I would like your custodian
work. Was picked up at the bus stop just up here taken home. His friend went to see him next morning and he was deceased on his lounge. Now, why he was discharged so early, I don't know. It's a medical thing. I got no medical knowledge whatsoever. But it just shows that there is a problem with health in our town and probably other towns as well. I'm just not sure how to go about it, Mr. General Manager, but I thought perhaps another notice of motion from council or direct representation by the mayor. I'm open to suggestions there, but something has to be done. We're an ageing population. Most of us have friends and family north of here. I dare say that a lot of people would know no one in Newcastle. Yet that's where they seem to want to send us all the time. So, any suggestions, Mr. Mayor, General Manager, which way to go about this?
Thanks, Councillor McNish. Look, at the first health meeting I went to, I raised the issue about people being sent south, including where we hear about jobbers with critical patients being taken to Tamworth. I'm saying, well, why not Lismore or Tamworth or Toowoomba, which are only 2 hours away, 200 kilometres away as opposed to 330 kilometres away. And I asked about other people who have asked to go to Toowoomba. I've got several cases this year alone or since Christmas. And the comment by the manager was, we are Hunter New England and they will go south. I double check that. In addition to the ones I have been notified of and two that you've spoken about, there was also a very ill child here and was kept at this hospital here for 23 hours. And even with the directive that a doctor had to go with that child to another hospital, that didn't happen for hours recently. And I've spoken with Janelle Sappin only within the last week and articulated the situation, and she was astonished, absolutely astonished. And her comment was, so the directive that people, if they wish to go north or to Lismore, is being ignored. This was and that was from the meeting I believe Councillor Sawyer went to in Sydney with the minister and the head of Hunter New England. And I said, yes, people are having to fight to go north and often have to discharge themselves in order to do so, or they are being forced south. So it's currently in her hands, but happy to discuss a motion to come forward.
Thanks, Mrs. Mayor. Next one I'd like to talk about is on page 6, and only fairly briefly this one. It's deliver business improvements. I wonder if we could workshop one day the fact that I'm sure we could every single one of us could think of ways we can save money. The General Manager said yesterday that he has identified savings of $700,000 already without trying. So there must be many, many more out there. I've got some ideas which will probably upset the unions, but I think they've got to be addressed, and I think there are easy ways we can make the money, not easy, but make money and perhaps lower this SRB request that we have to make later this year. Page 62.
Hang on. Hang on just a moment, Councillor. Thank you.
On a roll.
Sorry, Councillor, through the Mayor. That's absolutely correct, Councillor. Look, and the process is that, as you're aware, next week I intend to lock council away in this room for enough hours so you can go through the budget and go through our operational plan and go through all our activities, and together we will cut what you tell us that we need to cut while still maintaining operational integrity, and that is part of the process, Councillor. So absolutely agree with what you're saying, and that is locked in for next Wednesday, I believe. Is that Tuesday? Tuesday the 3rd, and at that point I will be seeking council's direction on where you want us to save money, and then that will obviously reflect on whatever the final SRB application is, if any. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. I'd just like to also add, we will also be going through the feedback we've had from the community consultations, the submissions and letters and emails that we've received, and we'll follow due process because the closing date is next week. And so once we've gone past that closing date, that information will be provided to councillors for consideration. And in a lot of that correspondence and feedback are suggestions exactly in line with what you were saying, Councillor.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Next one's page 62. I can't tell you what it's all about because I can't read it, so I just ask that next time we have a sheet there, it's a little bit clearer.
Yeah. Thanks.
And just before the last one more to go, Madam Mayor, but just like to say thanks, Libby, for putting the business paper together like this rather than have the monthly report separate. Very much so. So please continue.
Thank you.
The last one is page 119. Right with you. This is just a query. There's mentioned there was asbestos put into 55 recycling bins. How do we find that out, Mrs. Engineer?
I do know we had earlier, Gillian, our waste manager, advised us that they'd had 2 loads rejected at Lismore Recycling because someone had asbestos and wrapped it very neatly and shoved it in the recycling bin. And that then cost council, instead of our normal, I think it was $300 for recycling, it cost an extra $900 to take the entire load, condemned load, to the landfill where it goes off to Ipswich from Lismore. And so it's gone into 55. I know they were trying to find out, but it was just hard to find out who was doing it. I didn't realise it's now gone from 2 to 55. So
no, I have to take that on notice. I'm sorry on how specifically that they gained the information.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Mrs. Engineer. That's all.
but that's extremely expensive because that means that's 55
That's
loads.
so right.
And so we need, I did ask for a notice to be something to be added to the local news about it. But maybe it needs to be front page because that meant if it's happening that much. And I mean, they must think they're doing the right thing if they're wrapping it, but there you go.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Now I'm good. Councillor Sawyer, then Councillor Tom.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll have a comment to follow up from Councillor McNish's points about Hunter New England Health. I'm a community member on the local health advisory committee, and while ever Hunter New England is in its current format and the current CEO is in force, there will be no change to the way they run the operation. There has been a move by Nijo, I think, Mayor's there. I think we need to throw all our weight behind that push to break Hunter New England up back into Hunter, and they can look after themselves down there. And New England needs to regain the territory that they had before, that they ran quite efficiently, and with local area boards making decisions. That's probably a stream too far, but we do need to get on the bandwagon and break it down back to Hunter and then New England. Forget the and. So that's that. The good news out of the last meeting we had last Wednesday, I think it was from memory, we now have been guaranteed that there is a doctor in place through to the end of June. There's an agreement with the doctor. The existing contract with RAMS is under review, and they will have to have KPIs met in the short-term contract they're getting, and that will be added to expire with the same time as all the other contracts throughout New South Wales with local areas, so that one body might be able to tender for the whole state and have a whole panel of doctors available instead of 4 and 5 organisations pitching for the same doctors and having to pay overs to get these doctors, and the doctors are cherry picking apparently where they'll work because of the money available, not necessarily the area. So Topsy Jones from Glen Innes is our local area manager, and she's right on top of it. It's about time that the responsibility of these contracts fell back on the contractors to meet the contract, not Hunter New England Health to try and find a doctor when Rams can't provide a doctor. I also have a couple of items to raise myself out of the monthly operational report. On page 34 of the report. Make a note where it was. I'd like to proceed if someone else will come back.
No, it's only just to confirm what you said about the New England Joint Organisation of Councils. At our meeting, it was proposed by another council that we get it. Moving to a cut. That we asked to have it separated again, and it is worthy to note that Hunter New England is the only health district that includes a metropolitan area with vast amount of rural areas. So the problems we're experiencing are happening elsewhere as well. So it goes right out past Moree, all the way from New England. It's quite massive, and because Newcastle's obviously not central, it means we're the forgotten country. And I do know that the Northern Tablelands member, Adam Marshall, is pushing it and will be raising it in Parliament as well. Thanks, Vic. So Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question of the General Manager and the Engineer. It's an observation, it's not in the operational plan. I'm just wondering why we can't have some of the machinery operators multitask, right? Because it's terribly important when you have a grader that's sitting down for the weekend, when it's a roster day off, not working, it's costing us money, you're not getting any work done. If you're a farmer and you don't multitask, you might as well give the game away. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Peters. We do have many of them that are actually multi-skilled. Unfortunately, not everyone's a grader operator, but many of them do go through the Cert 3 training and are trained in 2 or 3 or 4 different machines.
Yeah, so we'll go Councillor Peter, back to Councillor Greg once he finds his comments. Councillor Kim and Councillor Jeff. So we'll go Councillor Peter, maybe.
Through you, Matt.
Oh, and we'll just welcome Councillor Pete Petty, who's joined us by Zoom.
Page 30, a question to the Chief Executive through you, Madam Mayor. It says there is a hiatus on grant applications until further notice. Could you explain to us why we're not trying actively to get more grants?
Sorry, I'll just qualify that statement. It's a hiatus on grants that are not cost neutral. So unfortunately, when you apply for grants, there's often a cost involved. Often it's a co-contribution, and generally it's between 25 and 50%. We don't have any money in reserves to cover that co-contribution. So anything that would be strategically important would come back to council. But at this stage, we're not out technically chasing because we just don't have the resources to do it.
Thank you.
Yes, some of our grants come with the inbuilt 10% council project sort of cost. And so things like that are fine. It's just where, for instance, some of our bridges have been 50-50 and we've had to do them, which is eaten into our reserves. But when you're talking bridges $1 million, it adds up very quickly. Councillor Greg.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, whilst I support Councillor McNish in the fact that the monthly operational report's now inside the business paper, the fact that it's got 2 numbers on the page which are totally different to each other. I wrote down the page that it was in one section, it's actually the page in the business paper. So first question is in relation to an earlier question Councillor Murphy asked about the freezing on positions. Our March report shows that we have an FTE currently of 112, yet we're apparently got 6 positions frozen, so shouldn't it be 106 FTE?
Through the mayor, now our FTE is 112. That's the actual structure. But out of that 112, we only have currently appointed about 105. And in fact, we've also got people outside of roles, filling roles and backfilling roles as well. So the FTE is always 112. That's the current structure. That's the FTE equivalent. But we have only 6 less than 112 employed at the moment. That makes sense, Councillor.
Does make perfect sense. Thank you, CEO. And could I ask for clarity that future statistics show what the established FTE is 112 and what the current FTE is, so that we don't have questions like this asked?
Through the mayor, yes, it does fluctuate quite regularly, but I'll look at how we can address that for you, Councillor. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Even an explanatory note there that the FTE relates to the structure, not how many bodies are necessarily there.
So sorry, I should just qualify, keep in mind that it's 112 FTEs, but we also have a number of roles that are filled by 3 people in terms of part-time and job share, but we don't go over 112 FTEs. Sorry, I just sort of qualify. So in effect, you might have 120 staff, but they're filling 112 full-time positions. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Perfectly, after my 25 years in human resources. That's what I asked for off the old general manager to have it included. It only took me 3 years, but I got it. And now I'm just asking that we have the 2 figures so there's no confusion what we're talking about. The other question deals with page 108 of the business paper or page 84 of the operational report. I just would like to make it known that during that wonderful afternoon when a lot of allegations and rumours were spread, that the CEO's bathroom was going to cost $40,000 and had been done, allegedly, and replacing the carpet was $30,000. On page 108 of our publicly distributed document, that anybody can access on the internet or come into the office and get it, it clearly states that there is a budget for the renewal of the bathroom of $20,000, which is exactly half of what the rumour was spread, and $15,000 to replace the carpet, which is exactly half. So I'm hoping we can divide all the other allegations by 50% as well. And it should be noted in the actual column next to budget, 0. We haven't done it because we knew we couldn't afford to do it. So it was a luxury item. The CEO can have put up with the carpet as it is and the bathroom as it is, and we have not spent the $35,000 we budgeted, let alone the $70,000 that was alleged. Thank you.
And yes, I'll just go to the Chief Executive, give you some more information there, which was also available publicly before as well.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor, thank you for pointing that out. I will also point out, if you have a look, that that number has been pushed out 4 years, acknowledging the current situation of council. The bottom line is that it's not a remodelling either. The bathroom in the house I'm in actually has major leaks coming through the floor and the walls, because when it was built, there was no membranes put into the showers or anywhere those wet areas. My wife and I have decided we'll put up with that for the next 4 years because we understand council's position, and so we've pushed it out 4 years. So I just want to make that note that we have no intention of repairing that. Thank you, council.
Which will find us in future. Thanks, Councillor Tim, and we'll have Councillor Jeff and Councillor Gian.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to make a note, first of all, about the general actuals versus the budget overall. I think most councils would certainly understand. I just want to make this on the record that so many of the budget figures are a lot more than the actuals. So I think people need to understand that council is reining in their spending and is not spending what was budgeted under the current financial situation. I've got 2 more notes. One is back to the health concerns. I just want people not to forget Urbanville. They have their own health concerns, doctors that want to retire, etc. So I just don't want the people of Urbanville to be forgotten in this debate. And a question for the engineer, if you don't mind, just to explain what the stimulus safety project on 2299 Mount Lindsay Road, although it's only a minor figure, and there's again, what is it, $16,000 less than budgeted for as well, but I just don't know what that is. And the Bundaberg project, budget of 1.6,541,000 is spent, and I thought that project was complete. So I just wanted to know why there's 1.1 million less been spent in a completed project.
Yes, the stimulus project is on Mount Lindsay Road at the section that has just been completed. So that just started over the financial year. So most of the money was spent last financial year. That's what we had left to spend, and we underspent by, I think it's $10,000. So we just didn't claim that last $10,000. And the Bundaberg Bridge is very similar. We had a budget of 2.9 million. We didn't spend that. It was again staggered over 2 financial years, and that's what's remaining, and we won't be claiming the extra $1 million.
Thank you so much. That's perfectly explained. Thank you.
Thanks very much, councillor Bonner. Look, I apologise too for people who aren't aware. This is Fiona Keneally, who is our Director of Engineering, and I think everyone knows her by now. And also we have Tamay Davidson, who is acting as Chief Corporate Officer today for the couple of weeks while Colin is absent. Next questions from Councillor Jeff Wright.
Yeah, only 2 points. One, just to support Councillor Sawyer and Councillor McNish, and to just push the fact that I think the council should adopt a very strong attitude formally to in supporting to the split of the Hunter New England area. I think the only way this is going to be solved is we become more political and we become more vocal in that aspect. I know there's been commentary and there's processes happening, but it's been going so long and it just ain't good enough. It's just, you know, it just keeps on adding up. Second point was on page 38, with regards crime statistics in Tennant, but also within the New England area, there used to be a regular meeting between the mayors, the sergeants and the police in charge going through statistics. Does that still happen, or is that?
Yeah, we've got a meeting next week. Tennant's a bit odd in that we have 2 police districts, Richmond as well as the New England one. I did actually have a brief meeting with the local sergeant on Monday morning, and we will be getting him to come and speak with councillors at the next workshop, I believe, as well, potentially. But we do have our first meeting with the police district next week for New England.
Is that a regular one now, or is it just
every 3 months? Yeah, every 3 months. Thank you. Councillor Gianna.
Thank you. It goes back to through you there to Darryl, the CEO, page 30, 4.1.3.3, where you've outlined the issue with misinformation. Okay, and then that just seems to reinstate what Mr. Robinson said, everyone else, that we have serious communication issues. Can you think of any other solutions we can put in place to resolve this? And then you continued that to put them straight would be cost prohibitive. I mean, how big are these concerns?
Through the mayor, look, we've used every channel we have at our disposal. There is a couple of channels, that we have at our disposal. One channel we haven't used, but I need to bring it back to council for resolution, is to set up a social media Facebook page for information dissemination only. That will require a resolution of council. The report is, I think it might even be completed, or it's very close to being completed. We'll probably bring that back. We'll attempt to bring that back to the next council, because I can't do that without your auspice. The only other thing we could do would be a direct mail out, unless someone's got other channels that I'm missing, would be a direct mail out, and that would cost council about $9,000, which I currently don't have.
The next question always for you, CE. The fact that you're working on in page 5. Okay, and it's 1.2.7.1. It's always back to health, advocate for health services. You had put in, it is also planned to investigate opportunities for council to facilitate possible local opportunities to attract specialists to Tenterfield, including a purpose-built facility. Couldn't we just improve the hospital instead of building another place?
It'd be lovely if we could, but we don't control it. We did, I mean, our hospital here was one of the best rural, it was in, I read it in, at one stage, one of the high level country hospitals. We had 66 beds. I think we're down to 14 now. Ever since our health district's been amalgamated, and it's been stripped of all sorts of equipment, et cetera, and unfortunately, we just don't control the hospital. So that comment there is ways we can seek to help our residents. For instance, I've had a call from a specialist in Lismore who deals with dialysis, and we've got people in Tenterfield Shire who need dialysis, and he runs his staff run clinics to teach people how to do the home dialysis, because Lismore is and his offices in Ballina are the Northern Rivers Health District. Hunter New England is not assisting our residents in going there for that education, and his people would also be willing to come to Tenterfield. So he has gone to Janelle Sappin as well to try to cut through this bureaucratic impasse that we have with Hunter New England Health, not recognising our geographical location, let alone the health and wellbeing of our residents. So it just continues and continues and continues. So the comment there by our CE is, as council, very aware and concerned about people's health, is what other avenues can we explore in order to provide better health outcomes for our people if Hunter and New England aren't going to do so.
My question is though, wouldn't that time that you're spending on that be better spent on, it's not my job, but pushing and lobbying more to get some sort of agreement in with Hunter New England, because there's everything up there at the hospital that we need. And I'm sure if we got, I don't know, I know it all comes down to numbers for them. And so we need to attract more people to the town so that there's more use of it. But I think the whole health issue is very vast. I don't think opening up a facility, a new facility for private, and then you have to have it recognised by National Health, I think, will help. I didn't even know that there was another hospital out your way, Tim, until I read something about it. So I think we should maybe look at looking at projects that will push more into, I don't know, working with what we've got instead of spending money building something else that will take up lots of time and energy from council staff.
Thanks, councillor. We're certainly pushing, but at the moment, or the last couple of years, it just seems to be uphill. So we'll continue to lobby to try to get a better outcome with our hospital, because it's in a great location. It's got plenty of room. It just seems to be an unwillingness in certain areas to have the facilities there that our residents have had before and would expect to be returned. And the one way of doing that is, as Councillor Sawyer said, is detaching from Hunter and coming back to New England, perhaps. If not, a couple of years ago, Councillor McNish and I said, if we can't do that, do we get put into the Lismore Health District? Because at least they do refer people north, and we do have people who also do need to go there, such as for the dialysis. I just need to check with Councillor Peter. Councillor Petty, do you have any issues you wanted to raise? Okay, sorry, I think you're muting yourself, but we nip read the no. Councillor Murphy.
I would like to support the CE's proposal to look into a private day, a specialist centre and day surgery. Because contrary to what Gianna believes, the proponent who will drive the project spends all the money to look into the feasibility, not council. So it's just a question of finding an appropriately qualified project proponent and let them spend the time and the money.
Thanks, councillor. So I'll now, everyone happy to adopt the monthly, oh, sorry.
Sorry, just one more, but I saw that Bruce Mills isn't here today, so I was wondering, do you see we've got a very serious problem coming in town at the moment of affordable housing. There's lots of houses that are empty. The rent is very high. I even had a look around because I was looking for a place, and the people who were trying to rent it wouldn't come down on their rent at all. Is there any way that a survey can be done as to how many homes are currently closed and why they're closed? And, you know, maybe we look at an incentive to open some of these, you know, give the landowners of those, the landlords, some sort of, I don't know, initiative to open them up, because it just seems strange in a town with so many houses that so many are empty and we don't have affordable housing.
Would it help if we in our our newsletter put something there saying that there are a high number of people seeking rental, and so that people with relatives who've got empty homes may then consider actually doing them? It may be that some people are in the nursing home and perhaps or the aged care, think they might be going to go home at some stage. Maybe that the houses require a bit of work, or maybe that they haven't actually thought about it. So perhaps that's something we could add to our newsletter, because we do have a housing crisis at the moment, and it's certainly worsening with people from down in the flooded areas who are seeking rentals elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, that's all.
So all in favour of adopting the report? Carried. Page 158, item GOB 37/10/22, Temple Shire Council additional special rate variation for 2022-23. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by councillor John, seconded by councillor Jeff. And we welcome our finance officer, Roy.
Madam Mayor. Good morning, Madam Mayor, councillors, executive. The purpose of this report is to provide, in accordance with the Local Government Act, a financial-based scenario for councils to consider whether or not to apply for an additional special rate variation for the financial year 22-23, which is next financial year. A brief background, and I'll take it that the report has been read, that the current rate peg for the 22-23 financial year is set at 0.7% by IPART for the Tenterfield Shire Council. In recognition of the low rate pegging of 0.7%, IPART has released guidelines for an additional special rate variation for up to 2.5%. This will lead to a difference of 1.8 from the 0.7 within our additional special rate variation. The finance team has conducted a financial scenario looking at the cost benefit analysis if we were to increase the rate peg and go by the proposed 2.5% by IPART. In my recommendation, I have mentioned that council should not consider the additional special rate variation for the next financial year. Looking at the monetary benefit, we are looking at a net gain of approximately $50,000, and that is based on a very conservative expenditure that would be related to in applying and administering the additional special rate variation for the year. In terms of the socio-political dynamics of where the council is heading, the current modeling and the workshops and the consultations which have happened in the last few months have all been based on the 0.7%. Agreeing and applying for the 2.5 for the $50,000 gain would result in redoing all of those workshops, redoing our long-term financial plan, our asset management strategy, and a rework of the community consultation as well. I take that the report has been read and the numbers are there. Though we appreciate that the IPART has agreed and listened to councils, I think it's too good, too late scenario for council to consider. By IPART, with a number of councils disagreeing by the original IPART's formula and methodology of calculating rate pegging. So yeah, my recommendation is not to go with the additional special rate variation.
Thank you very much, Roy. Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Roy, for that report. I agree with what you said about IPART, too little, too late. This is a disgraceful process they've been through. How they came up with a recommendation to put on an increase for council 0.7%. 0.7% buys nothing and creates lots of issues. So that's the reason I will be supporting the recommendation. It's causing confusion amongst our ratepayers because we're out there talking to them about possible rate increases are far larger than that. This sort of report from IPART saying, oh, by the way, that 0.7 was wrong. We're going to give you 2.5. Now the ratepayers rightfully think that 2.5 is the limit. We've got to take on the Office of Local Government and the government themselves and say to them, they need to make representations to IPART. I know they're independent, but they need to be advised that 0.7 was a farce. Then within 6 months or 8 months, whatever it was, coming up with, oh, by the way, we stuffed up, you can now have another 1.8 and give you the full 2.5. Rate pegging itself is a disaster, which we've discussed in workshops previously. It's an artificial cap on expenditure for when it was first introduced on road councils who just put up rates whenever they wanted to because there was no limits. New South Wales, that we know, is the only state that has rate pegging. It served its purpose, its day is gone. If councils have the flexibility to be able to put up moderate increases of 5%, 7%, 7.5% over a period of time without having to go through this rubbish of producing all these hundreds of pages of reports that hardly anybody will read, and it gives a distorted view of what's going on. And then you end up with an SRB being required to catch up with all the rate pegging problems that we've had. If rate pegging hadn't have been in, we wouldn't be looking for a special rate variation of any percent. We'd have been able to put it up by a moderate level that we could all afford to pay. Council employees and councillors are pretty well 99% rate payers themselves, so it's going to hit all of us. And we're not putting up an SRB just because we want to, we have to. But if this sort of rubbish coming out of IPART continues, it's just going to put it on the merry-go-round every 5, 6 years. So I think as a council, we need to stand up and take on the OLG and the government front on. Don't stir up IPART because we're still going to talk to them down the track. But I am right behind the recommendation. I think we need to do something about it.
Thank you. Councillor Peter.
Just a point of information, the gross amount was going to be 86,582. In reference to the early discussion on the unfilled staff vacancies, I'd like to highlight that just one of those positions not being filled would compensate for not gaining extra rate revenue of 86,582. So I will support the motion. I think ratepayers will appreciate that the rates will only go up 0.7%, and they will know that we will be trying to not have all those vacant positions filled, which will compensate for not charging the ratepayers extra.
Thank you. Further question or comment? Question? Look, I just at the next following up on what Councillor Sawyer has said, at the next joint organisation of our councils up here, we need to discuss this rate, it's rate capping plus rate pegging. Rate capping is where we are only allowed to raise $4.8 million in rates, no matter, even if we had 200,000 people lived here. And rate pegging is, of course, the standard increase that applies across the state. I personally think that our community wouldn't be necessarily so confused about having the additional 1.8 added this year. And unfortunately, IPART and in changing their mind are not giving it. We actually have to apply for it. And that's where the problem is. If we didn't have to apply for it and have our staff have to go and redo everything and go to another round of community consultation on a 1.8% special rate variation, in addition to the other part that we're looking for the following financial year, and it's the timing of that. Otherwise, I would have said, yeah, go for it, because in our deliberations, we've been looking, saying 6,000 here, 18,000 there. So this would have been a net gain of $55,000 for council. So, which is, significant enough in itself. But because of the process they've given us, which is that we actually have to go through an application process, it just becomes untenable at this time. So, but certainly appreciate your comments, Councillor Sawyer, and we do need to, I think it was very clear. The message went to IPART and the Minister for Local Government, how disgraceful it was, the 0.7, given that the same group had also approved a 2.5% wage increase. And we need to take it further and try and do something about the rate capping, which is affecting our shire and our residents. Thank you. So all in favour? Against? Want it recorded?
Yes.
Yes, if we can just
Yes, can you record that?
record the division. Thank you. Everyone else was in favour? Okay. Thank you. Against? Yeah. I'll be going with you, councillors, the time, just this is the time. Our next item, page 162, item GOB 38/22. Management letter for the final phase of the 2020/2021 audit. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Gianna and seconder Councillor Kinrose. And we also defer to you, Roy. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present to Council the final management letter from the Audit Office of New South Wales for the final phase of the 2020/2021 financial audit, ending financial year 30 June 2021. The report, and I take that the attachments to the report have been read, identified 1 low risk and 2 high risk assessment items that was identified by the audit. Infrastructure, property, plant and equipment, development of asset management system was regarded as a low risk system, low risk factor for council. And an update on that is that the asset management team, along with the finance team, is working to establish a systematic and modern asset management system. Currently, it's a work in progress, and it is making its way. We are looking at other modules as well, like this has been an ongoing process for some time, and considering the COVID implications and some of the resourcing issues that even the system providers had. But a decision will be discussed with management initially as to how and which system we will be going on with to identify and make our asset management system better. The other 2 high-risk factors were the rural fire service, firefighting equipment, which was not recognized in the financial statements. And the third point, which was regarded as high risk, was compliance with Local Government Act of 1993, which council was in breach for using externally restricted funds. If the panel wants, I can talk about the high risk factors in regards to rural fire service, and give you a bit of a background as to what that is.
I think we all know, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Mayor, may I just make a comment with my involvement with the RFS? Should I be sitting up this discussion, or is it okay to stay in?
No, it's fine. This is a general discussion on, it's to do with that depreciation and everything like that. It's not an operational issue.
And third high, the third high risk factor of the externally restricted funds, council has addressed that, and I will present that in the finance and accounts report after this one.
So some comments, any comments? I do have one in relation to the rural fire service and for benefit of people, certainly in the public gallery. What's happening here is the auditors have said that we are in breach because we do not include the depreciation of the value of all the RFS assets, their sheds, their fleet of firefighting trucks and equipment, or what's known as the red fleet. And if you look on page 172, it says rural firefighting equipment, specifically the red fleet vehicles, is controlled by the council and should be recognised in their financial statements. If we recognise all their vehicles over which we have absolutely no control over purchase, then our depreciation would be in a hugely impacted, which is why we as along with another 39, I think, councils are fighting it. And at the moment, we're waiting legal information that the Office of the Local Government, I believe, have gotten, because we do not control it. We can't sell the vehicles. We have no say in the purchase of the vehicles. So how on earth are we supposed to, in any accounting standard, how are we supposed to be responsible for the depreciation? For example, if they bought a chopper tomorrow and stationed in Tenterfield, our ratepayers would be responsible for the depreciation if that was the case. So when we can buy and sell their vehicles, then we'll agree to having their depreciation and value on our asset. So it's a carryover from a change that was made in the Office of Local Government legislation and the Rural Fires Act, and it just didn't marry up to that control going. So as far as our council is concerned, and we fully stand with our chief executive in fighting this, it should be like the police and the SES. We're not responsible for their emergency vehicles or their assets, and neither should we be for the RFS, over which we have no contribution to any purchase decisions or disposal decisions. So that's what that is to do with. Councillor Jeff.
And just to qualify, obviously RFS would have their own budgetary system they work by, so therefore it would be very, very adequate that their depreciation be included in their own budget.
Exactly. It's quite mind-blowing that it isn't. So obviously a very important part of our community and our safety issues, etc. But responsibility needs to be where it lies. So Councillor Top.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As far as I know, the only thing we do regarding the rural fire service vehicles is have them serviced out of our workshop, and that's all.
That's correct. So we actually do their servicing for basically pro bono. So yeah. So all in favour with the report? Aye. Thank you very much. Everyone, morning tea is ready. We'll break for morning tea. People in the public area.
Madam Mayor, we need a motion.
Oh, yes. Councillor Gregg and Councillor King have moved to standing orders. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
So good.
Ready to go.
Well, my wife just drove, she went to Adelaide and came back from a break and went to visit some friends there, and she came back just on the road. Coming up from through the day.
And I can understand.
No, I wasn't in a hurry, but I had to get there. Yeah, pick up the key.
Tom said before.
Thank you, everyone. We will now, someone can move and we return Councillor Gregg and Councillor King. We're back on, Peter. We move to page 196, which is item GOV 39/22, finance and accounts. Once again, we have our financial officer, Roy Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors, executives. The purpose of this report is to present, as the Local Government Act, Section 625, council money and the details of the council money invested of the Canterbury Shire Council. Council, as at 31st March, in its general consolidated fund, had $22.65 million. In its general trust, had $382,000. The attachments to this report is a certified schedule of all council investments as at 31st March, showing the various amounts invested and the applicable interest rates. Conceived water leakage concession policy update for the month of March 2022. One concession was granted under council conceived water leak concession policy with a total write-off of $607.98. In terms of 603 certificates, during the sale of a property, a 603 certificate is usually requested to identify if there are any outstanding or payable fees by way of rates, charges, or otherwise. There were 43 applications for 603 certificates in March 2022. Madam Mayor, councillors, the current table that has been put in there is an analysis of the restrictions that council has. This is a new addition to the finance and account report. The finance team have developed this table with a recommendation by the New South Wales Audit Office, which was the high risk 3, as mentioned in the management letter, and this is an outcome of that. What my purpose of having this report in our council report was to ensure and educate that just because we might have $29 million of cash, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the $29 million we can spend. In local government accounting, there are external restrictions and then you have your internal restrictions. Most of our money of the 29 million is actually subjected to external restrictions. The comment that was raised by the New South Wales Audit Office, which led to that high risk statement in the management letter, was that at the end of last financial year, we had, and you can see that on page 198, the right column, minus $1.2 million in our unrestricted fund, which basically said that we have used money from our external funds to fund our operations, which were actually meant to be unrestricted funds. The financing activity and the decision the councillors have made in regards to acquisition of loans, which was passed in the last council meeting, and strict reduction in managing our expenses where we can. We have seen that as at 31st March, we have gone from minus 1.2 million to a positive $210,000. The two loans that we did, which form part of the 2.94 and 3.3, that has assisted, that financing decision-making has assisted council in going to a positive number within its internal restricted fund. It's not a big number, but it is certainly much better than having a negative unrestricted to a wide value of $1 million. So that's the table. And we are hoping that the finance team will be able to present this on a monthly basis, if not on a quarterly basis. So the councillors can have a snapshot during the course of the year as to where our funds are actually traveling rather than right at the end of a financial year.
Thank you very much, Roy. And that also helps with community transparency as well. I made a boo and I didn't get a move and second for the actual item. So are we happy if Councillor Sawyer and Councillor Kim move the actual item as well? 18 there. Thank you. So any comments for Roy?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So the millions for the water treatment plan, are they in the 28 million?
The what, ma'am?
The funding we received,
The 9.7 million for the water treatment plant beyond investment.
We haven't actually received the grant funding, you know, get it as a lump sum, we claim as we go, and we're reimbursed on our spending.
okay, so the difference from 14 to 28 means we've received funding that is restricted. Is that right? Have I read that right?
Yes,
Do we know what funding that is?
those fundings will be reflected in, for example, the loan we did at the last council meeting with the 3.3 million. So that will be reflected within the 7.185 figure there, which forms the 28.81.
Thank you.
Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think it is a good idea to have it shown there. We've never seen it before, and I think the ratepayers would be welcoming to explain why those funds are there.
Absolutely.
The other most important question is any interest that's earned off those restricted funds. Is the interest restricted? And if not, can we move that across to the general fund?
Sorry, can I just interject? So that's actually reported every quarter as part of the quarterly budget review. So that is part of the requirements for the QBR. And then interest is actually part of whatever fund it goes into. So interest on investments for water, that's investment from water fund goes back into the water fund.
Just trying to find another income stream.
Yeah, it's only minimal. So like the $3 million that's invested from waste is getting us a few $100s for 3 months at the moment because the interest rates are so low.
Yeah. I just thought on 20.
Nice try, Councillor Sawyer.
I just thought on 29 million, it might be 10 grand or 15.
Yes, Councillor Young.
Just another question. I've noticed that the employees' leave entitlements, I thought they would be restricted.
Through the mayor, yes, ma'am, you are right. So the employee leave entitlement is actually an internal restriction that council has, and you can only have an internal restriction when you actually have unrestricted funds to support that restriction. So if you don't have unrestricted funds, then your employee leave entitlements or your planned and vehicle replacements will have nil balances in that.
So the reason there's no figures in here, what does that mean?
So at the moment, as at the last financial year, we were minus 1.2 million, so which meant that we had nothing in our unrestricted funds. As at March, we've had positive of only $210,000. And that is just to show that we've made a positive. Unless council decides that we're going to put a $10,000 or $20,000 of that into employee leave entitlements, then you probably see a figure in there, but that's something we can do as part of our quarterly budget review. It's an activity you would do when you actually have a very healthy unrestricted fund. So anything which is externally restricted means controlled by external parties, and internal restrictions are something which is controlled internally within council. We cannot take things away from the external fund or move things between external funds. Any internal restriction fund, we can make decisions on that At the moment, our challenge is that because we don't have much money in our internal restrictions, that activity wouldn't suffice the logic to actually do it. But if, say, we did have $2 million unrestricted funds, it would certainly be populating those figures and saying, for example, $500,000 for employee leave entitlements, $1.5 million for plant replacement. So those are the internal decisions that will impact the internal funds.
Thank you.
So all in favour to adopt the report? Carried. Page 200, item GOV 4020/22, capital expenditure report. It's in the attached document. Once again, we will, sorry, I do need a move and second. I've even written it down here. Move and seconded, Councillor Second, seconded by Councillor Chen. Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, the purpose of this report is to show the progress of capital works project against the year-to-date budget for each month. This report outlines council's financial progress against each report. I take that everyone's read the report. Is there any questions?
Councillor,
Roy, you know what the question is going to be because you've already given me the answer, and I said that it would be useful for councillors.
yes, Councillor, can you just press your right?
Be useful for councillors and our guests in the gallery to hear the response. It's in relation to Benu, where we recently approved a loan of $3,300,000. And what has happened is that the expenditure related to that $3,300,000 has been pushed further into 2022-23 financial year and the following year. And as you discussed with me, why that was still a good move to get that loan then rather than later, if you'd like to explain.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, the work has commenced on the project of 3.3. The reason we have shifted to 3.1 in future is because we do not feel that all the work of 3.3 will be consumed within 30th of June. And the reason we also took out the loan at the stage when we did is due to the lower interest rates which were on offer. Considering the financial markets and what the political environment is happening right now, it is expected that our Reserve Bank will increase the interest rates, which will lead to a fall drawn from the Big Four, in resulting a higher interest expense into the future years. So it was safe and steady to take an interest rate when it was low. We also were, when we presented them at the meeting, we had the supporting documentation of 4.45%. By the time we finished and we engaged into the offer, it was actually 4.40. So we actually capitalized on a reduction of 0.05% as well. But moving forward into the next financial year in the short run, we did strategize that if interest rates were to be increased, which they are pretty confident they will be increased this year, that overall life cycle of the loan would have costed the ratepayers and council a lot more money. These loans are subject to 30 years, 20 years life duration with quarterly, half-yearly repayment. So the accumulated interest expense payment would have been a lot if we were to engage in this loan into the future.
So in sum, the council is far better off on the actions that you've taken.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. Any more questions? Excuse me, well, I just wanted to check with in relation to some of the grant works, etc., where they've gone slightly over the 100%, the additional costs, and some of them are grants where outside communities, community organisations have actually gotten the grant. They're just absorbed out of our own council funds.
Yes, ma'am, that is right. Unless there is a specification in the grant application that if there are any overs which have been spent at the time of the application, if it's specified that we can claim that back, then that would happen. Not every grant is the same, so it would depend on each grant that happens. But if council has been given a fixed amount for example, of 10,000 and we spent 11,000. And it's not stipulated in the agreement of that grant that you can claim that extra over the 10,000, the council has to pay the 1,000 from its own fund.
Thank you very much. And on the top two lines under economic growth and tourism, we know the art installations on Tennille Creek, there's only one installation to go, and that is the Aboriginal 5 language installation that's going to go in Millbrook, and there will be an opening in June. Would have been completed except the ground was too wet. The other one was the Tennille Youth Precinct, which will be very important for us, particularly once the bypass goes in. If we could just, if I would just ask Fiona to just bring us up to date where that's at.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is at the point of final checking for the tender document to go out to the public. That should happen, I think, probably next week. We are also hopeful. There was a Streets and Shared Spaces grant that we applied for, which is more for pop-up type things that included pedestrian crossings, etc. And we're hoping to get some confirmation on that within the next week as well.
Excellent, because that would add to the precinct. Thank you very much. Councillor Jan.
Sorry, Roy, it's just before I discovered that Tennille Shire built a medical centre in Urbanville, but I've never come across it in our building and amenities. Who carries that cost?
See, would you like to answer that? I'm not aware of the medical.
I might have to refer that to Jess actually, because I'm not sure what the arrangement is. There's a small rent being paid as far as I'm aware.
They
Jess?
pay a monthly lease to council. I think it's $1,200 a month, somewhere in that realm. I couldn't tell you the exact amount. And council covers the maintenance, I believe. Is that correct? Because the asset is on council's books, the building. I'm not even sure exactly when it was built, maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
10 years ago,
Yeah,
2012.
there you go.
I think there's still loans outstanding.
No, that's been fully paid.
Have been fully paid.
Yeah.
Only recently.
Yeah, in the last probably 2 years, I'd say, that's been paid off.
So when they had that fire that I've just found out, they'd also had a fire and had to be redone. Who paid for that?
Insurance, was an insurance claim.
Yeah.
It was an insurance claim.
Yeah. So it was, we got fully reimbursed except for the excess, which I think our excess is about 5,000.
Could we just have this updated? Because every day you seem to discover that we've got more buildings that.
Well, that's not a current capital project, so that's why it's not on the list.
Oh, okay.
We do have another list of assets, as Jess is referring to. And so for the information of our new councillors, we could get an updated.
We would give it to you, or we can, it's a Excel file because it's a huge.
Yeah, it's a huge big
assets.
thing.
Yeah.
But we can get that to the next council workshop if that's the new system.
We can, I mean, we've got multiple Excel spreadsheets with all of our assets because it's a huge list. It's not something we would give it you in a printout because it would be massive.
No, thank you for that. It's just that you just realise that, you know.
So that report is just our current list of capital works projects. So that would have been something from 10 or 15 years ago.
So given our deliberations on financial status, it would probably be helpful to have that full list of our land assets and building assets. We'll have a workshop next week if that's suitable. Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Rhodes.
Through you, the Mayor. I just had one question back on the youth precinct, and maybe it's not a question that needs to be answered here, but the band hall, is that part of that cost pricing that's going out, or is it being moved, or where are we at with the band hall?
It's not part of the tender or the design and construct scope. I believe there's some other deliberations going on with the band hall, so that's a separate item to the youth precinct project itself.
And the same with the portion of land that has the native title claim on it. That's, I think, also we just got to work around those two issues and deal with what we've got currently.
Thank you.
Just so I can understand capital works, the developer contribution road works. Okay, we have 9,013 for the review budget, and then 21-22 actuals, it's 14,984, which you've got down as 166%. Funded by developer contributions. Could you just expand on that? I'm not sure what this all means.
Yep, so that's for a specific road that was funded by a specific developer application, which I believe is Quarry Road, is that the one tonight? So that one had a budget put in, I think, in the first quarterly budget review back in September. And that was, so the budget that was put in was the amount of developer contributions that had been received at that time, which was the 9,000 roughly. And they've since received more contributions since then, which will be a budget amendment in the next quarterly budget review. So there's been another, I can't remember off the top of my head, but that budget will increase in the next QBR that we're presenting in May council meeting. So that's why they've kept spending, because there's actually been more funds come in for that road. I just can't tell you the figure off the top of my head at the moment, sorry.
No, that's fine. It's just difficult sometimes to understand all of these
So
things.
yeah, that will be a budget amendment in the next month's report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So all in favour to adopt the report? Carried. Now we move to page 202, our final item in the opening session. Item RES4/22, Council Resolution Register. I'll move that in second. Councillor Gianna. Councillor King. Thank you.
Through the mayor, look, I'll take the resolution register that councils will be up to date with it. So basically, the recommendation is that council notes the status of the council resolution register to March 2022. We'll take any questions.
Sorry again.
That's okay.
See, so this Migoola, this Mole River Dam, can we just get rid of it? I mean, why is it always in every month when the government seemed to think it wasn't necessary?
No announcement.
Through the mayor, look, if council wants to remove it from the register, it can. But to be frank, it's not official yet. What we have, my understanding is that it's parked for the time being. I'm not sure we've actually got a final resolution from state government at this stage. And they're still in the process of doing some consultation. So whilst it's still on the state government books, it's sitting on our books, but I'm happy for it to be removed if that's how council resolves, but it's not really hurting anything, it's just there.
Seeing it's got risk to project, and this was back in 2020, and that's why it seems like we're the only people pushing for it.
Look, there's been consultation. There are groups out there that are for, and like a lot of these projects, there are groups out there that are against. I guess it should be noted that from an economic development perspective, if we accept that horticulture is now Australia's fastest growing industry, I think last year it was 65 billion, and if you consider that mining's about 100 billion, it would be an important addition for this community from an economic perspective. So it does have some importance, but obviously these dam projects, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, these dam projects are complex and complicated, and there's a lot of different interest groups. So for instance, there's a lot of issues in terms of native title, and it takes years for governments to work it out. So I think there's stuff in the background. I know our Deputy Prime Minister was for it, because we did have discussions with him, myself and Councillor Petty last year. So at this stage, no one's actually come out and said it's a dead duck. All we've got is that it's been parked.
So can we remove it?
Council directs that way. I'm happy to take it off the register. That's up to council.
Well, I think the register is more just a record of resolutions that have been made in that timeframe.
That's correct.
So as such, it just sits there, councillor Second, but it's something that we don't act upon because there's nothing that council has in their responsibility to act upon. So,
It's just a watching brief.
but it's something, I think there were 3 dam projects that were announced at the time, and the government has only proceeded with one of those.
It's just because the CEO, the mayor, met with Barnaby Joyce and the Cross Border Alliance to identify possible ways to proceed, nothing further to report. I'm just thinking this is extra money we're spending on a project that's not going anywhere.
No, so there's nothing happening, nothing has happened with it for 12 months.
Since November.
Yeah, so there's no further action the council will take in that field. They've done their studies, etc., and it just sits with the Minister for Water, who was Melinda Pavey and is now Kevin Anderson from Tamworth. And so council doesn't have any further role in it unless the government suddenly decided they were going to proceed. I think they did find a number of setbacks there when the minister came up to have a look, and as such, there's been nothing further heard and no further progress either way, and they haven't actually come out, as Darryl said, to say we've canned the project. So it just sort of hovers there. Yes.
Sorry, through the mayor, I can have one more piece of information. You're correct, councillor. Back late last year, councillor Petty and myself went to a meeting. There is a cross-border group, and correct me, councillor Petty, is it the Cross-Border Water Alliance? I think it's called. You may not be able to hear me. And we had a meeting with the minister from Durham, which is Queensland's Minister of Water and Natural Resources, and a group of mayors from the Queensland side, and they are working still to have that dam developed. And we're sort of like, just because we're a cross-border partner, we are part of that group unofficially, well, I guess officially, but at this stage, it is taking a hiatus as far as I'm aware.
And I believe on the Queensland side, the government has approved
That's correct.
Emu Creek Dam near Stanthorpe, so that will be their focus of attention, is that particular one. I don't know if councillor Petty, did you have anything to add, Peter?
Reading paper.
He's reading the paper. Okay, right. Thank you very
I
much.
was going to say Sandy Nearly did.
Councillor Murphy.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Fiona, I'm on page 211. I notice you've submitted an application in respect of the Bruxner Way, and that's to do with transferring Bruxner Way accountabilities to the New South Wales State Government. My first question is, how long would you expect they will take to get back with an answer to that submission?
4 years. It's been 2 years so far.
Yeah, look, even based on the priority round from last year, so the first round, I wouldn't be expecting anything prior to July.
And just as an update, Minister Sam Barraway did say that the independent body he's got looking at all the applications will come back to him. They're now started on their review. They'll come back to him in July, but he probably wouldn't be making any announcements till around November.
Thank you. The second question, Fiona. Has a submission been made in respect of the Mount Lindsay?
Yes, we supported a joint submission with Coable Council, and the General Manager Graham Kennett actually, on behalf of both councils, submitted both Mount Lindsay Road and Clarence Way.
Thank you very much.
And just as a further thing, we will get a combined letter from us, Wider, Inverell and Moree to support the Bruxner application as well. So all in favour? Carried. Thank you. That closes the open section. We now will, I need someone to move in second, moving into confirmation. 18. Councillor Regan.
18. You can turn the recording off.
And thank you for your attendance. We did, yeah.
See ya.
You had
Pretty low.
Thank you, everyone. We're now back in open session. I'll just read the officer's recommendation, which was passed for item COM 4/22, which is the proposal to amend resolution 295/20 regarding the leasing of lots 2, 3 and 4, section 37, DP 758959 by removing lot 4 from the proposed lease. The officer's recommendation that council 1, delegates authority to the chief executive to enter into a new lease over lots 2 and 3, section 37, DP 758959 for a 2-year period from 1st of November 2021 with a 10-year optional extension to the lease. And 2, reduces the annual rent from $1,000 excluding GST to $800 excluding GST, with other lease terms and conditions to remain unchanged from resolution 295/20. And 3, authorises the lease to be signed under seal of council by the mayor and the chief executive, and that was carried unanimously. Thank you. So that brings to close our ordinary council meeting for April. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you, Peter. Hope you get well soon. And we'll send a care package. Thank you, everyone.
Mayor, can we just be actually precise? I thought the workshop was on Wednesday, now on Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 3rd of May at 11 o'clock.
But then there's a workshop the following week on the Wednesday. So our normal workshop is on the Wednesday, second Wednesday, but the workshop next week is a specific financial one.